Well, hello there guys and girls, my name's Mikey and welcome back to my room. It's time for another tutorial. So today we're going to be learning how to draw basic skirts for your anime and manga characters. And we're also going to cover the rules of the skirt and how it hangs off of the body, so that regardless of what your drawing style might actually be, even if it's not anime or manga, these rules are still going to apply, so hopefully you'll find it useful. Now, quick disclaimer, I've got a bit of a cold still I'm looking after, so if my voice goes all over the place, I do apologise. And if you want to follow along, grab yourself a sheet of paper, maybe quite a few sheets of printer paper perhaps, so that you're working on a softer surface instead of straight onto a hard desk. I'm using a disposable HB mechanical pencil, but anything that you've got at home is absolutely fine, and maybe a rubber, because in life you make mistakes, but we'll put that aside for now. I'm going to be focusing on the traditional style pleated schoolgirl skirt for the sake of this tutorial. There's loads of different skirts out there. Overall, the rules of this type will apply to most of them, but also because it's the most common type of skirt you're probably going to see in the anime and manga world. Now, really quickly, let's talk about what's going on with a skirt and how it's built up. If you're looking flat on at a character at their hips, you might see that a skirt has a few very basic parts. There's some sort of belt situation going on here around the middle, like so, and then the skirt is a kind of rhomboid or triangular shape that goes out like this, so that the has a thinner waistband of material here and a much wider area of material around the thighs to allow for movement. And it's usually pleated in one technique or another. And that basically means that the material up near the top here is folded in on itself so that it kind of tucks around and takes up less space, and then that usually unfolds as it makes its way down towards the knees to create a wider zone. So if we look at this from a bit of an angle, basically what I'm talking about is a loose circle, don't worry, this isn't the main part of the tutorial, a loose circle around the hips and a much wider circle around the thighs with that kind of pleated vibe going on. So as long as you understand this basic concept, a small circle around the waist and a wider circle to indicate around the legs where we're working from, then you can pretty much draw most skirts in most variations. Get rid of that. Let's have a go at home. Now, we're going to talk firstly super basically about a front-on look at a skirt and how it hangs. So I'm going to start by just drawing a basic anime character standing up around about here. I'm not going to start with the head. I'm actually going to start with the chest, because we're only really focusing on the hip area, and work my way down and around like so. And if you guys want to know what I'm sort of thinking about when using basic shapes to build up an anime or manga character, then just have a look at any of the other tutorials I've got on the channel, because we do cover most of this at length to one degree or another. So I'm just going to have a character standing fairly straight around about here. Here's the center line down the tummy, down towards the middle, and then off on this side is going to be a bit of thigh that curves out here and drops down into one leg, like so, and back up. And then on this side as well, we've got the other leg also curving in, up and out in this direction. So this is probably really light because I'm just sketching it down. So I'm just going to put a slightly darker line than I usually do in real life, just so that this actually has a bit of framework that shows up nice and clearly on the camera phone for you guys. So down past the side of the tummy, popping out over the hip, curving out a bit further over the thigh. Now I've got torso tutorials and leg tutorials and all other sorts of bits already on the channel, so I'm not going to worry too much about this. And then we've got the front edge of the legs that curves up and in, across the hip joint, down in the middle where the privates are, and then back down, a bit of underside of bum from the back part of the leg for this slightly more side-on view thigh here, which is going to just come up around here, back up to where it gets to them hip bones, which then curve in, edge of the tummy zone down there, belly buttons around about here, and rest of the chest up there. So there's our basic middle of a character. So the first thing is that smaller circle where we're going to put the belt of the skirt on. Now on this character, that's going to sit just above this hip line really. So if you imagine that you've got this curving line just around about here, let's make sure that's all nice and in focus, good. Up here, and then the belt of the skirt, I might have it follow along here. And that's going to be our starting point. And this isn't focusing loads on a particular skirt design, it's really just starting off to sort of say what's going on with how a skirt is built up. So now that I know this is where everything's going to start from and hang from, around about this line, I'm going to do a much more casual, larger circle, somewhere around about here, and this is going to be how the skirt hangs off the rest of the body. So you can kind of see it's much looser, much wider, and then everything is going to join up from here back up to here. So on this edge, I'm just going to imagine a line that comes and joins that kind of loose circle back up to the top of the hip there. And then on this side, excuse me, I'm just going to have another line that comes down and lets it hang about there. So there's a super basic skirt design, but we need to get in the idea that it's pleated as well. So what I like to do is just mark off a few fairly even zones along the top of the belt area, just like so. And these are going to correspond to areas down on this side as well. So for example, we'll start off with the straightest looking line, a single pleats line that goes down here. And then the next one's going to curve out a little bit so that it kind of matches the amount of distance it's taking up along this line. And then this one follows down here, just like so. And then this one again's curving a little bit off to the left. This one even further with that curve. And this one further most of all, as it goes out like so. And that way we've kind of mapped how everything relates. The material here is the kind of same stretch of material down here, even though it's kind of reaching around a wider area. This probably makes more visual sense than my version talking about it. So to describe it as being pleated, or essentially folded back in on itself, what we do is we break up this bottom line. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just take this edge that we've got off here, and I'm going to start above the line and then cut back down at an angle like this. Quite harsh. So if I do that down on this side, I'm just going to put a point in there, and then I'm just going to come up, cut back down at an angle again, come up, cut back down at an angle, and just keep doing this. Keep going back up the line, cutting down towards a point, back up to the line, cutting down towards a point, and then just a little bit on the end there. And it's this part here which is going to be the actual bottom edge of the skirt, this line. And this tells us that we've got all of this material folded back underneath itself, and it spreads out to create that skirt shape, which kind of means we end up getting rid of this sort of building line as it appears there and there and there. It's all about this particular dynamic going on. You can see how we've just used a basic circle here to start and a basic circle down here to get the idea across. So let's work a slight variation of this super simple thing, because that's basically it. That's your skirt done. Let's get another character up here. I'm going to go bottom of the chest about here. And what we'll do is we'll just have a design that just shows ever so slightly more life. And we're going to split off another line in the middle to break up how a lot of that flow works. So I'm just going to very loosely try to get an idea of hips again, just going across and out. And of course, excuse me, I'm trying to keep this as quick as possible for the sake of the tutorial not being too long. So it does mean there's no perfect art here. It's not a final masterpiece that you're going to catch of anything, but hopefully it's going to get that idea across. So I'm just going to have legs together, bum just pointing ever so slightly further out to the left for this example, like so. And again, I'm just going to slightly thicken up that line just to make sure it shows nice and clearly for you guys. So here's the bottom edge of the chest. Here's the edge of the body, falling out towards the hips, like so. Curving around that hip curve into the thigh. Get a nice smooth line for that. Down to the bottom of the leg here. The leg's going to come back up and in, like this. Out across the front like this. And curving up round on this side, back up to the hip, edge of the tummy a little bit out there, top of the chest off here. Let's go up with another design. So imagine a thicker belt line. So again, I'm just getting that curve nice and around here. I'm going to have that come nice and high for this particular skirt example, up with our eye line, like so. Maybe there's a very basic design where it kind of comes around to the front here. There's a button or two, really doesn't matter. You can put whatever you want. And then now I'm actually going to, instead of having a flat circle, just create a bit of a kind of an arcing line that loops back around a little bit just so that we've got an indication of movement and flow, and something that just gives a bit of life to the form. Now, obviously I can do a straight line from here to here, and a straight line that kind of reaches up around the hip there, but I'm also going to imagine a second line around about here as a measuring point, following that curve, and that's going to show a kind of 2 levels of bump of skirt. So if I imagine a curve here, and then maybe a separate bump out here, just splitting that up, and in a very similar vein, the curve around here, maybe this is hugging much closer to the bum, and then bumping out around about there. And I'm going to keep this in mind when I do those pleats again. So maybe I'm going to split this up into some larger sections, 1, 2, 3, and then just maybe one more on that side. And these pleats are going to probably just show these 2 different sections of bump and curve as I draw these lines in and follow them around. Just gives it that extra element of kind of 3-dimensionality as well as kind of fluidity. It shows that there's movement and there's life going on. So I've got those basic pleats in here. I might go ahead and just add an extra line that tucks in up along the top of each one of these, just really focusing on that fold. Again, just going to make sure that's showing up nice and clearly on the camera phone. Good, it is. And around here, instead of just using straight jagged lines, I'm going to start to use some curves and loops. I'm going to have this line be straight, and then I'm going to go up with a loop just around here, and then bring that nice and smoothly down. And where I've got this line, a loop just again, bring that across, and again just a loop here. Just these loop shapes coming off here, and then maybe this shape is overall going to come up on this side, and so I'm probably going to put a loop down there as well, just to show on the underside it's also pleated and curving off. And so it's these loops that are going to be the edge lines of this bottom section. So it's actually going to go out to here and out along here. So it means I can kind of get rid of the lines that I've used as the main guiding points on these sides. These loops are really now where all the magic is at. Hopefully that's nice and clear again, where it hoops down, comes off, and just shows that it folds in on itself by drawing the inside edges as well. So then you've got something which is like a bit of a natural fold to it, a bit of lift and a bit of life. The underside, of course, being a bit more in shadow, but we'll need to knees up in just a moment. So those are the really basic, simple ways that you can get the ideas across of drawing these skirts on these characters. So let's just have a quick look at maybe some slightly more dynamic examples that might be a little bit more difficult to get the head around. If we do a sitting character, so I'm going to imagine the chest is up here. We're going to be looking a bit down for this example, and the middle of the tummy is going to be here, so the hips are probably going to be around about here, like so. Okay, great. And so maybe this character is sitting like flat on the floor with both legs forward. So again, I'm just very loosely frameworking that out as an idea. And then I'm going to come back, smooth that up, get that idea down, get that character actually built in a bit. Lovely. Now I'm just going to go in and just put another further line on that, just to kind of make it nice and clear what's going on for you guys at home, by curving up and around the back like this. Get those hips in. Let's curve up on that side as well. Here's the tummy. Quite a tough angle to work with, but we've got it. And then we're going to work out the skirt and how it sits a bit more. So imagine this is bum sitting down on a flat surface somewhere. Let's start with that skirt line again. I'm going to follow the curve of the body around to create that belt zone. And we'll also just get that in. Probably worth just saying, if you're not subscribed already, come click that subscribe button down there somewhere. It really helps me out. We've got tutorials and all sorts of drawing and talking stuff on this channel. It's the main kind of theme. I'd love to have you guys along for the journey. But now that we've got that belt bit in, this circle is actually going to be a bit more of material hanging down all over the place. So this curving circle is material that hangs over this thigh surface, and it goes over this thigh surface, and then it kind of goes a bit more flat, maybe as it sits on whatever surface we're looking at. So I imagine that this circle line that we've got down here, is now just a bit more of a material edge line, just to show how everything's built up and how it's all just sitting down, bring that one in a bit, on the floor. But we still use really similar rules. I'm going to have a secondary line that again is about halfway, that just kind of flows around the situation. It's going to help me map it out. And I'm going to get those pleats in once more. So I might have one here that just kind of rumples and jaggedly follows its way over this thigh. I might have another one, again it's rumpled up, but gets down to this thigh. And I'm just going to follow this situation out and around. Each time I hit this center line, I might just give it a bit of a bump or make it change direction a bit. And it's again being these building blocks, flowing down over the course of the hip, but maybe just going out a bit long and loose, flowing over the side of the hip here, but then maybe just flattening out, and it kind of unfolds and goes wide. Off the back of the hip here, certainly, and then out again. And there's bits coming off the back of the hip we can't quite see from this side and this side. And down on this side again, really rumpelstiltskined and crumpled up, and then just out. And then similar things, flat off here, out off there, and just coming out as well. So again, it's just mapping out this shape and then now building it back together to actually create a skirt design. Now, because it's so widely flattened out as a shape here, most of these pleats are actually going to be unfolded at the bottom edge, really kind of wide and flattened out. In this zone, I might get still a bit of hook over and curve where these lines start to come back up towards the middle. And down on here, I'm sure I'm going to get a little bit of that shape as well. So we've still got that zigzag pattern we apply to the edge. Over as we go over this thigh and over the edge, that's going to loosen up a bit. And it's actually just going to be kind of different, wider segments of material, I dare say, flattened out. I'm starting to create these kind of little slight lumpy hills, these flattened out edges to represent where everything is just kind of widened a bit. So again, just flattened out there, maybe a slight triangle bump there, maybe just a little bit of shape along this side, and just making sure it's not a perfectly smooth curve. It's these slight crumples to show that material was once folded over, but it's been pulled flat apart because it takes up all of this space. And again, bringing that all back in so that we've got these clear lines that show the folded pleats working back towards the top. When it starts to widen out, maybe we've got these different edges of flattened zone to show that, oh, it's not folded on top of itself anymore. It's widened out. Now we can see all of that material along the same plane. So just creating these wider zones. All of that's kind of probably happening now, just like so. But again, it all kind of meets back up towards that belt line. So I hope that makes sense for a sitting down example as well. Obviously, I'll put some shading on this in a minute to give it more of an idea. But I think we've got time for at least one or two more kind of dynamic examples. We'll fit one up in this corner and we'll fit one down here. So let's talk about like a kind of front on running, jumping kind of pose. Really the skirt's coming up kind of above the bum line and it's kind of doing something really dramatic. Again, I'm just going to imagine like a character's doing something in motion. So let's go for a fairly low angle. This is going to be my hip area here. Let's get that wide, which means tummy zone up there, rest of the chest up here. And I think what I'll do is have the middle of the torso curve down around about there. Here's our center line. Here's our belly button. Curve over the hips up here. And then I'm going to have maybe one leg just coming down in a kind of sort of running pose, perhaps off on that side. The other leg coming up and maybe towards us. So this thigh is going to be really foreshortened down here. Here's a great big circle for what is probably a knee that's right up in our business towards the camera. And then rest of the leg is probably shooting right off and back down towards the ankle. It's really tough with that kind of foreshortened vibe. Maybe the foot is somewhere in the distance like that. Hopefully that makes sense. So again, let's just slightly firm up those lines a little bit. A bit of tummy, a bit of character, a bit of hip. Then from the hip, a separate bit of thigh of the leg that comes down. On this side, it's all going to be curved right in and over. For the thigh on the leg on top, And we've got the joint of the knee as its own separate thing that really pops out towards us there. A fold in the edge of the leg as it comes up around about there. Outside edge, bum and thigh, back up to the hip. It's all about how these things connect by drawing these different curves. Obviously I'm drawing a curve against the natural flow of the hand in this direction, but I hope you get the idea. It's not the cleanest line work in the world. Let's get that belly button back in, centre line back down, and then down off here now. We've got the rest of that leg line going down. So if you imagine, here's our thigh working its way around here. There's our thigh working its way around there. Hopefully it makes it a bit more 3D. Got an ankle bone somewhere around there. Not going to worry too much about what's going on with this foot. I'm just going to leave a generic shape. Maybe it's wearing a shoe. But again, all that is kind of a bit superfluous. What I want to talk about is how the skirt works here. So let's get that belt line in. Somewhere round about here. Lovely. Nice thin one. Not too important. Something like that. Up on this edge. Just give it a little bit of shading along. And now we're going to just create like a wild kind of hooping loop shape. So we're going to have the skirt that's basically kind of going up around here, down on this side, but then looping right up over this side, and then back round and down like so. It's a really kind of wild flow that it's got going on. And we're going to kind of do all of these kind of shorter areas that are right up towards us as camera as each really kind of abstract, crumpled up lines to kind of help show a bit of idea of how these lines are kind of making their journey out. So we're going to go out around about here. I'm still going to imagine different fold lines that probably come up about halfway, which means I'm going to have other crumpled bits of the skirt come out on this side, and then maybe flatten out and reach wider as they make their way around. As we go down, maybe there's going to be other bits underneath folds that catch up and go out this way. Over on the sort of back end side of things, that's much easier. We can just put a couple of points in there. And then up here, maybe another zigzag kind of shape as it comes towards us. One more that just nips in there, but then the rest of it, all of a sudden, we're dealing with the underside. So on the underside, it's the exact same thing. You've got to start to imagine, right, how are these lines flowing out of the body and then coming up from around about the hip zones? Are they still following these kind of folds and curves as the material does its own thing? And then we've just got to worry about, again, getting this all to join up along the bottom. So I'm going to go around about from this side. Already got a few abstract bumps over there. Another lump that comes up around about here, which I'm going to again start to use straight lines in these little bumps and zones to join up the idea of the rest of this material. I'm going to give it loads of extra folds and curves to show that this is really all over the place, like so, and then like so, like this. And then maybe I'm still going to just kind of jag up along here to show that this material is still folded quite a lot back on itself. Then following that curve up and around to the underside, maybe again, I'm just going to show that some of that goes back on itself. All of this really abstract zigzag line idea is totally fine. So we come back in, back around the other edge. And then we just need to start to clean it up and join up a few of the bits. So again, just making sure that's all in shot. I'm going to go ahead and imagine that we've got this whole fold line of skirt material up here, which is great. That explains loads about how this material is working its way back up to the skirt, like so. All of these pleats and folds have all sorts of tucks and bits going on, but it's all over the place with this material design. Down on this side, it kind of just drops away like that, so that's automatically kind of fine and out of view. And then on the underside, we might just see a bit of under edge of material making its way back in, depending on the angle that we're looking at here. And then on this side here, probably going to be a bit of top edge, even though this is our main edge line that follows all the way around, follows all the way up, and we're looking at the underside. So again, probably should draw just some very basic lines on here to indicate that this character is wearing pants of some sort, just to make it YouTube safe. But basically, you can really kind of go to town with it, as long as you don't get too kind of scared or worried about these abstract lines not always making perfect sense. As long as it gives the idea, all of this is folded in and doing all sorts of crazy stuff, it's going to work. So I'm just joining some of these lines back up, and on the underside again, don't stress too much. The fact that you've got this bit in a bit more shadow as an underside edge or a different tone of material, it's going to show what's going on. It's going to be still clear enough to the eye. So yeah, how are we doing for time? I think I'm going to go ahead and just fit one more in really quick. Okay, great. Just reset the recording on the camera so that it doesn't time out. And I'll just fit one really small example in here as well. So it's another kind of like more of a bum shot reverse of the skirt going all over the place. So let's just get the scale down much more. We're going to go for a character that's obviously just a bit more bent over, leaning away from the situation. Here's the middle of a 5 from the back side. So I'm just going to imagine one bum circle zone here, one bum circle zone there, and then legs just kind of coming down and away. This is going to make more sense just as I start to join it up. Here we've got some thigh and leg zone and hip. And then here we've got really similar thing. Thigh, leg zone, hip. This curve is going to work all the way around to the top back part of the bum. And this curve is going to remain a fairly smooth arc because obviously we're going to have this character wearing some pants of some sort. There we go, one up here. The other curving pant line, I'm assuming, is something like that from the back. And again, let's just give that some slightly darker form just to show what's going on. Like so. Again, not the best curving around working in this direction, but let's just get an idea there. If you imagine the rest of the character's form, the back line's going up here, rest of the chest is up there, shoulders somewhere around about there, but we're not going to worry about that. So let's have the wind's kind of catching up under this skirt. It throws everything up in this direction. We can't really see the belt line here of the skirt, but we know where it is. So if we just imagine that this material arc is going to go up and around like so, and then back and down like this. If you imagine maybe this character has got their hands right down the middle to kind of keep the material down here, sort of just trying to keep everything flat, whilst the wind blows everything else up. So again, it's a case of these kind of more abstract lines and crumples and folds really coming into play in part of this zone. So I'm just creating this kind of really abstract line around about here. And as it kind of smooths and flattens out around about this point, it's going to be much simpler to deal with. So let's have a crumple here, and then a bit of a curve there that just lines up with this. And I'm just, again, doesn't have to kind of, you don't have to follow a perfect example for these bits, but various crumples and lines and triangles to show that this material is being dealt with to some regard. And that edge line's probably going to follow up here. And then it's really just going to smooth out a bit. It's going to come up to here. And this underside zone is just going to follow that example where I'm going to create a second line of material to show how everything's working a bit flatter before it then pops out and up. So flatter, in, out and up, and much like this and so, and it just keeps doing its own thing, expanding outward. And these lines are all kind of concentrically aim towards the middle. Concentric might not be the correct term, but you get the idea. And then as we just get this bottom edge line into place, comes up to here, starts to curve around and work a bit more normally. I'm going to go in, I'm going to hook up, I'm going to go in across here and only hook up very slightly because the material's being pulled apart, so those differences in level are a little bit smaller. Maybe let's go right in across here. Maybe it's going to double back a little bit as it makes its way round across here. Maybe it just bumps out to reach this line, which in turn comes in and starts to maybe hook the other way. Hook in a little bit, come on down, hook in a little bit as we come down around, and then again, just that material coming down to do its own thing. So once more, we just kind of finalize these lines, get that to hook back in, understand what's going on with the material, which edges of the material you might still be able to see depending on the angle we've got as a viewer to everything happening on here. Probably get that edge in. This one just curves quite nicely down onto there. This one is more of an expanded pleat situation that comes back there. And we've got a bit of fold on this part here. And these bits as well just make their way back in. So I'm just going to kind of finalize a bit of a curve of the small of the back here as it curves round on there. Just get that sorted out a little bit more here and here. Curve in. Highlight that leg just a little bit more. And boom, that is basically it. So you've got the top edge of the skirt and the underside. There's really not much more to say to that when it comes to the very basic versions of the design. So I really do hope you found this useful. I'm going to go ahead and really quickly just kind of do the lightest bit of shading in the world just to get some of the idea across. So I'm just going to bring ever so slightly the edges of these skirts in like so. And stop and say thank you very much for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it to be of some use. If you're getting your own anime, manga and art design done in the background, that's absolutely great. I hope you've got some skirts on your characters now and they're not walking around in the nudie buff. If you've got any suggestions as to what other tutorials you'd like to see me do in the future, get in the comment section below and let me know, and we will of course crack on from there. So if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do so already. That really helps me out. Otherwise, I hope you all have a really lovely day, and I'll of course see you soon. Oh yeah, and I keep forgetting, don't forget to come support me on Patreon, where your support makes all of this possible, and I have separate art rewards and goodies for you guys on there. Forgot about that. Okay, peace out.